Welcome back to my Metal Gear Solid V Explained lecture series. This will be number 8 in the ongoing series of explaining what the heck Metal Gear Solid V The Phantom Pain has going on, why it has it going on. This one I'll be covering missions 15, 16, and hopefully 17. They're kind of shorter missions and I want to jump through them real quick, so there is a decent amount to talk about here, and a few little interesting connections to past missions that'll come up here. But let's just get started. So mission 15 is called Footprints of Phantoms, after Lingua Franca, after Snake escapes. We got to go track down the source of these. Well, here it's the Walker Gears, but the Walker Gears stand in for probably an exoskeleton in the past that was developed by Big Boss to turn any regular old soldier into more or less a super soldier. So that's what these bipedal weapons are all about. This plays into a kind of a theme that's been developing throughout the Metal Gear Solid games after 4 with Peace Walker. You had a quadruped. It was a four-legged animal, essentially. And before that, you could say the Shagohod was kind of a quadruped in a way, with its two kind of front drill things that it has going on, and then the back tracks being like its legs, so sort of like its forelegs. But now here with Sahelanthropus, we have them standing up with the archaea and everything. It indicates that this is it's a bipedal weapon. It's a man that's been turned into a weapon. In other words, Big Boss is kind of doing to other people what was done to him in a way, but it's kind of an evolution. How evolution was quadrupeds to bipeds in general. Pardon my computer, apparently. And so these skull prototypes that I've been talking about, and we'll get to them in Traitors Caravan, but they're kind of related to these exoskeletons. I think Big Boss was maybe developing both of them at the same time. Seems like, maybe he wanted something that he could give to any soldier and make them better, and then he wanted drone soldiers that he could control, possibly. Also, when you find these D-walkers in the world, oftentimes there's 4 of them together. And the 4 number kind of ties in, I think, like I said, there's always 4 skulls. There's the 4 B&B units. It kind of ties in with this number of 4 bosses, 4 drones, so to speak. And there's also, I think you could say there's like 4 main bosses in Metal Gear Solid 2 in terms of like the personages of Dead Cell. There's Fat Man, Vamp, Fortune, and George Sears are kind of the 4 of Dead Cell, which is kind of funny because Foxhound was kind of represented by 5 people. Really, there's more than 5, but there's kind of like the 5 main sort of soldiers, and then like a leader who's like the 6th. And so there's this. I'll talk about this in other areas, but I'll just note it here. It's kind of a complicated topic. It gets into Fox Die stuff, but there's kind of this move from 5 to 4 bosses after Metal Gear Solid 1, essentially. After Fox Die is applied, the program kind of changes a little bit, and the number of 5 it's really sub-bosses. 5 sub-bosses becomes 4 sub-bosses, and I think that might have some kind of relation to the number 4 of the 4 D-walkers that you see in Footprints of Phantoms and in other places. Also want to note this is at Datati Abandoned Village, so that's kind of the metaphorical command structure, and the place has been abandoned. Now there's a line that repeats a couple of times in a couple of different places in Metal Gear about a unit being abandoned and taking the fall on a cover-up. And I think that kind of relates, the abandoned word kind of relates to the themes of abandonment. There's the song Nuclear by Mike Oldfield that was used in the marketing for Metal Gear Solid V that has the lyric, the abandoned child, deep inside the abandoned child. Implying that there's this abandoned child, kind of an orphan or someone like that, who's, important in some way. Yet, if, this on the surface level of the game, the only one really that fits that bill is Eli, and nobody's really thinking about Eli as like the poor little abandoned child because he's Liquid Snake, right? But if you think about him as Chico, it makes a little more sense, I think. I also want to note that you can kind of compare Mission 15 and the whole what we're doing there to the Ground Zero side ops, the destroy the anti-air emplacements. How I've said earlier, I think it was way back in C2W, in the first video, that we're destroying the anti-air radar and the phantom pain, and the anti-air radar and the signals that the intel send in the air are kind of both related in this way. And now, since we show up in a helicopter, we kind of are the thing that's in the air. And this ties into with the theme of the language, parasite and the vocal parasite, and Monoko Yanioka, the snake's mouth, speaking, vocalization being something that goes through the air. And so in a sense, kind of these, you could think of these D-walkers as like anti-air emplacements. And so instead of going to Camp Omega and destroying the anti-air emplacements, you're not going to Datati Abandoned Village and destroying their D-walkers, their little exoskeleton prototypes. They're probably not prototypes at this point, but you see what I'm saying. And this kind of is, tied in with Huey. Huey says he's the one who developed the D-walker, now it's everywhere. Well, Zero developed Fox, and now Fox's sort of structure, outer structure at least, represented with the exoskeleton, is now everywhere. So I think that's kind of what's going on with Big Boss. He's basically stolen Zero's whole way of doing things and then just turned it on its head and multiplied a lot of the things and just given it a lot of sprawl that it was never probably intended to have. I think that maybe relates to Kojima's first intentions with Metal Gear and how he intended it to just be maybe this one little game. And then because of what happened in Snake's Revenge being made, maybe he saw something himself in the potential of this story that somebody else sort of showed him via their actions with Snake Revenge, or their words or something, or a certain perspective or something like that, because this, I think, ties in with the recontextualization. So yeah, I think that's enough for Mission 15. We can move on to 16. 15, there's more to say about 15 probably because there's some mission tasks there. And really the structure of Datati Abandoned Village too. It really has a lot of Death Stranding bait written all over it to me. The LZ for the helicopter at Datati Abandoned Village is on top of the mountain, sort of the little hill there, and you kind of have to climb up to get up there, and feels kind of like you're playing Death Stranding for a little bit, trying to find the right places to climb up and not slip down and all that kind of stuff. And I've heard a lot of people complain about the Fox engine and the way when you try to climb up slopes that you'll slip down and all that, and I'm like, well, they definitely did that on purpose. After playing Death Stranding, it was already in mind, I'm sure, back then. I think Kojima made a lot of little subtle connections between the Phantom Pain and Death Stranding and his intentions in both of them. I think there was something else I wanted to mention. Oh yeah, there's this mission task that keeps popping up, and I haven't really totally figured it out myself. I think Snake keeps having to kidnap a transport truck driver, and sometimes even a transport truck, and we'll do that again here in Traitors Caravan. That's why I'm mentioning it now. It's this reoccurring mission task, and all of a sudden it becomes the main topic of the mission. And I think that kind of relates to the Hidden Diamond and how it's a reoccurring mission task, and then it becomes a subject of a mission with the honeybee, but it's something hidden in a place. And the Hidden Diamond will come back up again in, I think, Mission 41. Yeah, that one will be fun to talk about. But so Mission 16, let's just go ahead and get into it. The Traitors Caravan. Now, what are we doing here? We're spying on a transport truck that's carrying, we find out later, some yellow cake. It's not enough yellow cake to actually make anything fissile or anything like nuclear, really. But it's also got this weird stuff in it, like a very thin layer of highly enriched uranium that is weapons grade. We find out later that that's happening because there's parasite inside the yellow cake, which is enriching the uranium. So that's a transformation thing going on, kind of similar to the oily water separation thing that I was talking about earlier, and the pause, divine feminine power of transformation. All that stuff is like, this is all parasite stuff. So this Caravan back in 70, well, I'm going to call it 76 now, was probably carrying Big Boss's parasite research and probably had some of his drone soldiers guarding it. It may not have been like totally like we think they are here, like the skulls are. They may have been a different version. They may have been like more like real people who were just like controlled by, sort of like the way Psycho Mantis controls people in Metal Gear Solid 1 and how Screaming Mantis controls people in 4. It may have been something similar to that. So Parasites, archaea. Oh yeah, and the way they work is, these parasites are like, you can think of them as like little quantum crystals that exist on the quantum level. They're able to sort of make up the atomic structure of any type of atom, any type of matter, so they can become anything. And again, that relates to like nuclear weapons enrichment and the transformation and the power of the parasites to sort of make the mimetic into the real. So this all ties in with that weapon to surpass Metal Gear stuff that we've been talking about in the Phantom Pain with Huey, and how that's really Fox. But back then in 75, like I said, they had probably captured Chico and gotten some genetic stuff from him that they could then work off of for making their own soldiers. They got enough data, essentially, I think. But I don't think they had Chico himself, because we know Eli was in Cypher's care and then escaped. So it's I'll get into it, but it's pretty clear that Eli really didn't escape from Cypher's care because of the gunsmith stuff. I'll get into it, but I said earlier, Chico probably didn't really escape. He may have, but it may have just been like a cover story for plausible deniability. So now, if you listen to all these conversations in the mission task, you'll hear this transport truck driver talk about, at the first spot, Nzambi. He's like, do you think it's true if anybody that looks under this, into what's in the back of this truck, that they get possessed by Nzambi? Now, Nzambi is it is related to zombies a little bit, but Nzambi is like I'm not really super well researched into this, but as far as I understand it, it's a sort of a feminine goddess figure that comes from the Congo language and Congo area, and it has roots in the zombie religion, the zombie mythology that popped up in Haiti later and was popularized in sort of like Western perceptions of the voodoo religion and in zombie stories and films. That really the stories started popping up in like the mid 1800s, and the films didn't pop up till about the 1930s. But this is where zombies come from, and the word zombie and the idea of controlled drones made to do work out in fields. Back in the Haiti days, the story was that an evil sorcerer or Bakor would have some kind of a concoction that he would force a servant or a slave to imbibe. It would kill them, or appear to kill them. They'd be buried, and then about 3 days later, they'd rise up from the dead. They really were just in a comatose state. And when they come back to life, they're kind of a little blank. They're kind of like drones. They still respond to commands and will still do what you ask of them and stuff like that. It seems like a part of the personality was stripped out, maybe some kind of a an effect from not getting enough oxygen and being in a comatose state and then coming back out of it. It's probably some kind of drug-induced thing. There's actually still laws in the book today in Haiti about causing someone to die and come back, and that being illegal, essentially. It's kind of a crazy thing. It probably wasn't really totally a real thing. It was mostly coming up out of, rumors and hearsay and stuff like that. But the fact that the story persists to this day and it's here in Metal Gear is kind of interesting. So yeah, go listen to those conversations, the mission task, and you'll hear that there's some interesting stuff there. So the other thing I want to mention is the CFA is here in the region, right? But this particular convoy is driven by a guy from Zero Risk Security, ZRS. And he's got the ZRS emblem on the side of his truck. And there's 4 other ZRS soldiers around a Jeep that will join the convoy, but you're supposed to pick them up for a mission task. And what the heck is this Zero Risk Security outfit, right? Why would there be a proxy outfit out there with the name Zero in it? Who would do that? And we're led to believe that Skullface does it, but I actually believe that Big Boss originally, Naked Snake Big Boss, originally created Zero Risk Security as one of his PFs that he probably used for more of his personal stuff, like sort of a pseudo personal guard that he could use for his really dirty work. And put the name Zero on it because it's his really dirty work. And I think Skullface later, Ishmael, Old Fox, later took control of ZRS and then used it here in his schemes in the Phantom Pain for his crafting of, well, I actually think he had already crafted the vocal cord parasite, and I think what he was actually crafting here was fox dye. There's a whole theme of repeating what just happened over and over again, so you can sort of if you just did a thing and you got away with it, you can sort of say you're doing it again, but do something else completely different. And since you got away with it last time, you got a perfect script to follow and everything. You see what I'm saying? I think that may be a thing that goes on with Cypher in the whole overarching scheme of Metal Gear. So Zero Risk Security is a new one added to this whole mix of different outfits out here in Africa. We've got ZRS, Unita, Saner, MPLA. It's hard to keep track, right? But essentially, the easy way to think of it is that the MPLA are the good guys. They're our side. They're the Zero side. And all these other ones are just a bunch of distractions and proxies created really by Big Boss's whole war economy effect. And because we know Zero didn't want to have all this sprawl. It's too much for his plans that he didn't really need all this stuff. So the final note here about Mission 16, and then I'll move on, is that these drones, there's a couple more things I want to say, but I'll say this and one more thing. The drones themselves kind of relate to the AI pod. There's this question of, I think, I haven't really approached it, but there's this question of where did Big Boss get the idea for making his own little parasite drone soldiers? And I think it came from the ending of Peace Walker. I think when he saw what the AI pod connected to the Peace Walker thing was able to do, he thought, wow, that was actually something kind of interesting. Maybe if I had that in a man-sized soldier and that kind of high-level decision-making, but then it was under my control and I could just tell it to do stuff and it would carry it out, maybe that would be kind of useful. I think that's what he thought, essentially. So I think the AI pod maybe even was crafted to maybe even mess with him a little bit because they used the boss's personality. I don't know. There's a lot of questions as to how much, because I think going back, I think Cypher Zero always knew that Big Boss kind of held some grudge against him after 64. And that whole event in Snake Eater may have happened the way it did for reasons that go even further back that we just don't know yet. But I think essentially the indications are Big Boss was kind of kept at arm's length by Zero and possibly even was being manipulated the whole time in Peace Walker. And sort of maybe was fed the idea of drones back in 74 to get him to regurgitate the drone soldier idea as a part of Zero's bigger plan. Because I think Zero had a bigger plan here. Oh yeah, and then the last thing is Mission 16 kind of relates to Mission 8. Now, what was Mission 8, right? Well, Mission 8 is Let me look this up and just make sure I get it right. That one is occupation forces. So there's no intel to get here. Well, actually, there is some intel to get, but it's not like you get the intel and then the column leaves. This time we're a little faster. We go get the intel at this tent when we land, and it tells us where the column's going to be. And I think even we're told by Kaz that the escort unit is supposed to be at the tent when we get there, but it's just not there. It's already left. But if you leave from the tent after you get the intel and you just run straight to the next location at the airport, you'll beat the escort unit there pretty much every time, unless you just take a real long time to work your way in and out of that little area with the tent. But there's only like 4 or 5 guards, or maybe 6 guards around there total. So Traitors Caravan kind of has some links to occupation forces and the caravan there. You could think of these skull soldiers here that pop out as kind of a replacement for the colonel. So like I said back then, the colonel of that armored column might have been sort of a replacement cause, sort of a drone, a proxy. And so now here we've got literal drones. And just go back and think of all the links that Mission 8 had to Skullface's mission, the tapes in Ground Zeroes, the tower, and how the tower is here at Nova Braga Airport, right where we start. So there's kind of all the same themes. We don't get the intel in the tower this time, but it's kind of like all the same story elements are there. They've been remixed a little bit, but it's pretty much the same. And that's that right there tells me that that's the AI. That's not just Zero doing that, but that's probably Anderson's AI, which gets into a lot of other stuff we don't have time for right now. So now we can move on, I think, to Mission 17 and rescue the Intel agents. Now, I said that Mission 15 was kind of a Ground Zero side-op, kind of a revisit. And Traitors Caravan is kind of a revisit of a past mission. Well, Mission 17 is another revisit of a past mission. It's the Ground Zero's Intel operative rescue again. Except this time there's 2 agents to rescue. And yeah, they're the same guys. The guy that's escaped and is walking away is kind of our symbolic Hideo. In the way that I speculated that Hideo was captured and then kind of escaped, and then we show up and rescue him, which is kind of a mix of what happens in the Phantom Pain and what happens in Ground Zeroes. Here we're shown that there's 2 Intel agents, and one of them can't walk, and he's back in the camp at the cells, but the other one's made it pretty much all the way out of the camp and is almost clear, but there's a squad closing in on him, and we've got to get him out of there before the squad finds him. So that's kind of, I think, more or less analogous to the Hideo rescue and the Cause rescue back in Phantom Limbs. So this, and Intel agents. So, but who's this other one that can't walk? Well, who's the guy you rescue in Ground Zeroes that can't walk? It's got to be Chico, right? I think this mission kind of implies that maybe after Chico was captured, or maybe even before he was captured, but probably after he was captured, I think he was working as an Intel agent. So I think he was there for so long that I think Ishmael Snake was able to probably infiltrate the base a couple of times and maybe even make contact with him. It's hard to say that for sure, but there may have been there's kind of some implied recontextualization via this mission in the way that and so this soldier, wait, no, it just hit me. This guy's not Chico, he's Paz actually, because he's kept in the pit. He's both Chico and Paz. So him not being able to walk makes him like Chico, but also he's kept in the pit. There's these 2 cells. Well, if he's Chico, why isn't he kept in one of the cells? That's where Chico was kept, right? Paz was the one kept in the pit. So I think that's why the pit is reproduced here at Kaziba Camp right next to the 2 cells, is because it's evocative of Paz's pit that she was held in the cell. So this guy, again, quiet as Chico yet again. There we go. And yeah, I think that's about actually it for mission 17. There's a little more going on in that mission too. There's a couple of guys that show up to assassinate the target, and you have to not only get your intel, the second intel agent, the one that can't walk, you got to get him out before those two guys show up. I think there's a couple of CFA heavy hitters is what Kaz called them. And if you go knock them out and Fulton them, Kaz, I think it is Kaz, tells you that they were showing up here to take out the target, which kind of implies that someone was assigned to show up and assassinate Chico, which implies to me that Big Boss's plan was always to insert the parasites into Chico and then have him killed. Yeah, but see, I don't think it would have worked if he had just, like, say, shot Chico or something like that, because I think it's like you kind of have to, like, do some massive damage, I think, essentially, so that the parasites can literally replace enough of the body so that enough of them is parasite that they can start doing different stuff than what humans would be able to do with their human structures. And this gets into crazy, crazy stuff, but I think that the way the parasites work, you kind of internalize your trauma while you're in a consistent form. So, like, while Chico was still Chico, and while Paz was still Paz and being tortured, they kind of kept internalizing stuff, but they wouldn't have been able to totally die because of the parasites. And even if they were killed, they might have come right back, you know? We see later Quiet's choked out and then appears to be dead, and after just a few seconds, she just snaps back at full power and then just murks a whole group of dudes that were torturing her. Well, that's what was going on with Paz, and that's Mission 45. I'll get to that later. But I think that this kind of relates to why these guys were showing up to murk this intel agent. It's not just because of, generic conflict and bad guys versus good guys. It's because I think Big Boss was planning to do all this really bad stuff to Chico to transform him into kind of a monster to use for his own ends. Yeah, and we should probably stop there because Mission 18, Blood Runs Deep, has a lot going on with it. That one gets more into Foxhound, and I've talked enough about it already. We need to really delve in here now. So that's Mission 18, that's Missions 15, 16, and 17. I also want to note that I went back today and completed my notes for Mission 30. That's a page and a half. And it's got a to be continued on it because I'm going to have to just finish the notes in the Sahelanthropus mission. So that video, Missions 30 and 31, I'll probably talk about in one long video. That'll be a doozy. Y'all can look forward to that. I've got lots to say about that. I've got lots to say about all these missions up till there. Because this whole campaign is, like I said, this leads up to the fall of Big Boss and how his mutiny led him down a path that led him to ruin, but also kind of led to a lot of long-term consequences for the rest of Cypher, the organization, and a lot of the other people that he hurt along the way, too. And a lot of time has to be spent kind of fixing all this up. And so that's why I think we were seeing the same thing repeated over and over, is it's the repeat of it is kind of a way of sort of like taking its power, the past event's power away from it, and sort of like doing something more constructive with it, maybe. It's kind of a way of like getting over trauma by like approaching your trauma head on, maybe. You could look at it that way. So yeah, that's it. Hope y'all have enjoyed this lecture number 8. See you next time. Peace out.